Go Brighton Marathon 2022, 750 miles of training, 100 hours of running. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to The Vegan Runner. I'm still buzzing from Brighton Marathon 2022. What a day. The sun shone, the crowds cheered and the seasided. It was just pretty much perfect. Perfect race day conditions. Couldn't really fault it. My second marathon and my second chance at running it in under 3 hours, and I'm glad to say the first one at Manchester wasn't a fluke. I came across the line with a new marathon PB of 2:55:40. So this is a video really of two parts. This video is a review of the race and of Brighton Marathon, and I'll go through things like the course, what the elevation is like, how the starting pens worked, the support on the course, and the things like the frequency of aid stations, the bag drop, the finish line. And then I'll leave a link to part 2 of this video, which will be more of a kind of race recap where I'll talk about my race experience, the gear that I wore, how I went about running a 2:55 marathon, my nutrition and hydration plan, and any lessons that I learned from the race. If you're thinking of taking on Brighton Marathon, you'll want to watch that as well. There'll be plenty of extra course info. Or if you're running your first marathon or going sub-3, you'll find valuable information in the nutrition and splits and hydration plan. Finally, I've saved the most shocking thing that happened to me on race day to the end of part 2's video. You really couldn't predict this, and when I think about how it could have affected my race, I can't even go there. But anyway, part 1, let's get into it. So first up in the race review, starting with the pre-race organisation. On the whole, I thought this was pretty decent. I signed up last October, and then from kind of the 16 weeks leading up to the marathon, there were regular emails from the event organisers with useful training tips, messages from the sponsors, that kind of usual sort of thing. I found the event guide for the runners really useful. I think they outdid themselves here, and then they even do a spectator's guide as well, which made it a lot easier for my wife Rachel to find out the best places to watch and how to get from one part of the course to another. There are a couple of unusual things to be aware of, just to let you know. So first up, you have to collect your race number from the event village on the Friday or the Saturday before the race. Most events I've run, you get the number posted to you in the weeks immediately before the race. So this was a first for me, and we decided to travel up to Brighton from Devon on the Friday, stay in an Airbnb, and if you're planning on doing that, book your accommodation early. We didn't, and we paid for it as the prices inevitably go pretty high around that weekend. But we were staying for the weekend, which meant we could park run on the Saturday morning, then collect the race number, enjoy some of the awesome vegan food options that Brighton has to offer, and generally just relax until race day. Now then, when you go to collect your race number, you'll also be given a plastic bag and your race number in a sort of sticky label format. This is your drop bag, which if you're going to use, you need to fill and then take back to the event village before the race. This meant a trip back to the accommodation for us, filling the bag, sorting that out, and then back to the event village again to drop it off. It's the first time I've ever had to use a drop bag service the day before the event, and in fairness to the organisers, it worked really smoothly, and it was quite nice having one less thing to organise and sort out on race morning. Now, heading to the race village the day before the event was a nice touch too. There's a really good kind of buzz and kind of festival atmosphere around all of the different tents, with the likes of 2XU, Hoka and Asics putting up good tents, and then there were loads of different stalls setting out all kinds of running related gear and food. It was something that I wasn't expecting to spend too much time at before the weekend, but we had a really good look around, met some lovely people, and got to try some new food and some new gear as well. So now on the other side of the race and reflecting back on that, I can kind of see why they make you go and pick up your number and do the whole drop bag thing before race day. Gets you into that village and it gets you looking at all of the sponsors' gear and all that kind of stuff. But I enjoyed it, and I made it, it just kind of made it more of an event, and to see all the kind of people, milling around and all the different competitors just made it feel like a bit of a kind of like a running festival atmosphere, which was really cool. One thing to be aware of though, and really I should have noticed this before leaving the village, your race number is color-coded to your predicted finish time. And this affects which starting pen you're going to go into. Now, I was emailed before the race. I don't know if all of the waves get this. I assume you do, but my email said that you're in the white wave, so get a white wave number. Now, when you head into the village and you go to the race number section, you go through little queues with little barriers, and above each one's a little sign saying, your predicted finish time. So it's like sub 3 and then 3:15, 3:30 and so on, that kind of thing. And I went into what I thought was the sub 3 section, and then someone from the event scans a QR code on the phone and then checks your ID and gives you a race number. I assumed that the QR code would have told them which wave you're going to be in, which bib that would hand over, but I left the tent not realising that I had a red wave label, which was the same, which is the second wave and starting pen. It wasn't really until like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening I realised that actually I should have had a white wave bib, and that I need to do something or sneak into the white wave area to get into the right wave. Now, it was all okay in the end. In Preston Park, where the race starts, there was an information tent. Now, I spoke to the guy there and they were really helpful. He gave me a new number and I was able to get into the white wave. Now, it's quite important, as depending on your predicted finish time, you'll be with the right paces for you, and also you have a lot of people in your wave running at around about the same pace. Had I started in the red wave, I would have had to catch up to the sub 3 pacer and probably do quite a bit of weaving around other people as well. So luckily it all got sorted out before the race, but it did lead to something that could have been race changing, if not life changing, but you're going to have to watch part 2 to find out what that was. Once you've got your race number, you can then collect your finisher's t-shirt, which is a bit strange since you haven't crossed the line yet or even started the race. Now, I went to collect mine at about 10:30, 11 o'clock on Saturday morning after parkrun, and they had already run out of t-shirts in my size, so I had to go a size up. That's not that impressive from an organisation point of view. I don't know what happened there, but I got mine pretty early on the Saturday morning. I can imagine there were a lot of people collecting their numbers and shirts after me that would have been equally as disappointed, especially when you're paying a premium for the race already. This shouldn't really be the case, but if you can, get there early on that Friday or in the evening when the race village gets set up, and get your number and everything sorted, and then if there's any problems you can always go back on the Saturday. That would be my advice. Right, okay, race morning. Our Airbnb was conveniently just a few minutes from the finish and the event village, but a good sort of 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the start at Preston Park. It was kind of the perfect distance for a warm-up. If you don't know Brighton very well, don't fret about knowing how to find the park. There were so many people heading in that direction on race morning, you can't really miss it. So I joined the throng and the steady sort of queue of people walking towards the park, and once there was a huge amount of portaloos and plenty of space for a gentle warm-up. You will hear the announcer on the PA sort of giving you extra information and letting you know when it's time to go to your starting pen. There are also toilets once you get into your pen as well, so that's pretty good from an organisational point. Okay, so on to the course. It's a really interesting one. It's neither flat nor hilly, and a PB is definitely possible even if you're coming from a flatter course. The biggest shock for me really was the start. You almost immediately, after leaving the park, head up into a pretty steep climb. Now, I'm not the best ascender, and as predicted, the pacers get ahead of me here, and slight panic, but it's alright. I got well ahead of them on the downhill, which comes immediately after the climb, and then that's generally flat for the rest of mile 1. There are some shorter inclines on miles 2 and 3, and then mile 4 is gently uphill, and then you come back down it in mile 5. Now, the steepest hill is probably at the end of mile 5 and leading into the start of 6. It's short and sharp though, and then it's out to the marina section of the course, which is the sort of furthest eastern part of the route. It gently undulates through to mile 12, where you come back into the centre of Brighton seafront. These hills can look scary from a distance. You can kind of see how long they are as you approach them from like half a mile away, but whilst you're on them, actually they're not too bad at all. Sometimes you barely even notice you're on a climb until you're near the top, and then you kind of realise that you're coming down and you're picking up the pace a little bit. Now the second half of the race is pretty flat. Again, there are gentle undulations, but they're hard to see and you only really notice them after a little bit. The last few miles are almost pancake flat and brilliant for a sprint finish if you can muster it. Speaking of the finish, just wow. Just so well attended. It's a brilliant final stretch. You can see it coming from a mile away. The crowds just get bigger and bigger and louder, and it's just a complete tunnel of noise as you head down that home stretch. It was just awesome. So I'd say the first half of the course is easily the hardest. If you can get past that at target pace and you're still feeling good, and you can feel positive really that the worst is behind you and you should have a fairly event-free final half to the race. If possible, I would go out slightly conservatively in the first half and then push on from the second and make the most of the flat sections. Alternatively, because you start higher up than you finish, you can try to catch up on the seconds lost on the climbs on the downhill sections. Now, I'm a much better descender than ascender. I like nothing more than taking the brakes off and just letting gravity take control. So that seemed to work pretty well for me. It's also a relatively fast course thanks to the few sharp turns and corners that are on the course. So you can enjoy huge stretches of the course without a single turn for miles, making it a lot easier to see what's coming up and, more importantly, find that flow and that rhythm. It's also a really pretty course. Most of it is beside the sea, which I just love running along. The residential part around Hove and the city centre section is decent too. Lots of good crowd support, and I'll get into that in a bit. But before I do though, I hope that's given you a decent idea of the course. If you have any questions, or if there's something I've missed out, go ahead and drop a comment down below. One of the things I love about big events is being supported by the amazing crowds. It's always amazed me that so many people will get up early on a Sunday morning and then stand around for hours cheering all of the participants around the course. It's one of the things that makes big events like this really special, and if that was you in the crowd, a big heartfelt thanks from me. You made the atmosphere great, and you don't know just how much of a difference it makes to people when they're really struggling and then they hear their name or the club being supported and cheered for. It's just awesome. So thanks again.
The bigger runners, yes.
Now, most of the route is well supported, with the busiest areas around the start and the city centre, and around the seafront and the finish. I really liked the addition of the classic minis and scooters that were ahead of the timing car and front runners too. Again, just adding to the sort of festival feel of the race. The quietest parts of the course were around miles 8 to 9, where you head inland on the marina section before turning back out onto the coast. And then the part I was warned about by a few people before the event, which is the power station out by Shoreham. Miles 19 through to around sort of 23 were really quiet, and you can smell why. I don't know if it's like this all the time, but there was a pretty strong smell of around that area. Now, it's not the most enticing smell to be breathing in the latter stages of a marathon. It was this part of the course that I hear the most criticism about, because I think it's so quiet. The scenery is pretty industrial at that point too, and it's a fair chunk of the marathon course. And you know, I actually didn't mind it that much, to be honest. Apart from the smell, it was pretty flat and fast, and there was a couple of guys around me that had been running near for most of the race, and we'd got chatting and started supporting one another. And the quiet just allowed you to go inwards a bit and kind of focus on breathing and cadence and generally just sort of staying alive. There's also something awesome about seeing those mile markers hit 20, and you know that a lot of the hard work is behind you, and if you're having a good race, it's just a case of holding on until the finish. A lot easier said than done though, as that's often when people start to hit the wall, and might also be why that section of the course is pretty notorious. So let's talk about the aid stations now then. Generally there's a water station every sort of couple of miles or so, and then less frequently there are gels at the same stations and energy drinks as well. These were well stocked and really well attended by volunteers. Again, a big thank you to everyone handing out water on the course, especially since the organisers decided to put it all in paper cups.
Race organisers, cups, water, come on. You try drinking this?
Which meant you probably got soaked as the participants grabbed the cups at speed, squeezing the contents out all over the place. I've only ever run in events where there's bottled water at the the water stations. So this was new to me, and over the miles I developed a better technique for grabbing the cup and then kind of like crushing the top to drink from it. More often than not though, most of the cup would just slosh about all over the place, going just about everywhere except my mouth. They are also quite hard to grab, and I dropped one cup and quite a few people I saw like in front of me as well dropping cups all the time as they're trying to grab them. So it just means if you miss one or drop one, you kind of have to break your stride again to try and grab the next one, and then so on. I don't know, I think the organisers have gone for paper cups for a fairly obvious reason. They're recyclable and I guess they have a better image than plastic bottles. So from an environmental point of view, I think it's a progressive step. From a runner's point of view, I think it's a backward step. They're just so hard to drink from, and to keep the contents in the cup whilst you're collecting them is really tricky. There's probably a very good technique out there to collecting those cups and drinking from them. Or if if you've seen a better solution to paper cups and plastic bottles at a race that you've done, I'd love to know what it is. So just leave a comment down below. What's your technique or better solution? That would be good. And also I'd love to know the kind of how much of a difference there is between a recyclable paper cup and a recyclable plastic bottle. There is in terms of their environmental impact. If they all got recycled, is there much of a difference? I'm not an expert, so I don't know that, but yeah, drop me a comment down below on your thoughts on paper cups at races. And then just one last thing just to say on the plastic front. They save a ton of plastic by not using the bottles, but then once you cross the finish line, they give you a plastic foil blanket at the end of the race, which is just a huge amount of plastic. And I wonder, are these necessary? I think maybe just saving them for athletes that come across the line, maybe unable to move. You know what it's like when you stop and then just can't move again and people sort of lie down. For those athletes, that might be a better idea. Or if an athlete asks for one, then give them out, but rather than sort of giving them to every finisher. But speaking of the finish, it was just awesome. That last mile stretch, the crowds were huge and the noise was just deafening. There was just such a brilliant atmosphere there. It really was something else. Now on crossing the line, you're handed your medal, which I did think was a pretty decent design. You can see it just down there. There was also fruit, some water in cartons this time, and some lovely non-alcoholic Erdinger Weiss beer, which just goes down a treat after a marathon. If you like beer and you haven't tried Erdinger before, you're in for a treat, and the low alcohol version tastes just as good in my opinion. So very, very welcome after crossing that line. Once you've collected your goodies and recovered slightly, you can then pick up your drop bag. This was really quick and well organised, and then you can walk around to meet your friends and family. Handily, there are numbered stations, so once your spectators see you cross the line, they can head to the pre-arranged numbered flags and then wait for you there. This was a really good idea and makes meeting up with everyone so much easier. But overall, I highly rate the event. I had a great time out on the course, which was just scenic, it was well supported. The event village adds a really cool kind of festival vibe to the weekend, and Brighton is a really cool city. If you've never been before, imagine like the trendy parts of London right next to the seaside. And from a vegan's point of view, there are endless places to eat at, and we definitely need to visit again to make the most of the food scene there. It isn't the cheapest of races to enter. I think I paid about £60 for entry for 2022's marathon. At the moment, entry is about £65, but it's going to get progressively more expensive leading up to the race. So I think it goes up to about £85 when they've sold enough entries. So if you're thinking of doing Brighton, it pays to kind of book it early. I'd say it's worth doing at least once, and if you live a ways away like we do, make a weekend or even better, a week out of it, and you can have some time to enjoy all that Brighton offers. Right, that just about wraps up the review of the race and part 1 really of this video. In part 2, I'll recap on how my race went, including the kind of mile by mile splits, the nutrition and hydration plan, the gear that I wore on race day, and the thing that I think could have derailed the entire race, which I didn't even realise until I got home later on Sunday. Right, I hope to catch you in part 2, which I think will be coming out in a few days' time, but until then, be the best you.